first things first, let's get something cleared up. Hours after the mini-budget last Friday, did you celebrate with the Chancellor and a group of hedge fund managers at a champagne reception?
Well, look, we often have drinks receptions for donors in the Conservative Party, and in fact these people should be lauded because we don't have public funding of political parties, and these are people who go out, make money and donate to political parties in the same way as they do for the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats. In terms of that get-together, it wasn't a get-together of hedge fund managers, it was actually Britain's sort of leading entrepreneurs. Yes, I was there, but it's the sort of normal drumbeat of treasurers at events, as we call them in the Conservative Party, that we have all the time.
So there weren't hedge fund managers there?
I mean, I'm sure there were, or there was, I think, one that I know of, but in terms of the rest of the people there, lots of them were people who've grown and start businesses. In fact, the conversations I had, because it was my job before I did this, was people who work in the property industry. And what they were all saying is they back this government's drive to create growth in the economy because they understand that you cannot have a rising tide of prosperity that flows under every door in this country without first creating growth in the economy.
Just want to look at the optics of this event. The details are in the Sunday Times this morning. So as the markets crashed, you acknowledge you were at the multi-million-pound Chelsea home of a Tory donor, along with other donors, including hedge funders, financiers, many of whom may have made money from the crash in the pound. How is that in any way appropriate?
Well, I'm not sure that any of them did make money from the crash in the pound, and of course you will know that the pound's actually had its best week against the dollar since 2020. If you look at the close this week, before we start casting aspersions against what people may or may have not done,
whose home was it?
Absolutely clear. Well, I think people can read the Times if they want to. Let's be absolutely clear.
It's the home of somebody who has acknowledged taking short positions on the pound before.
Let's be absolutely clear. This is part of the normal drumbeat of treasurer events within the Conservative Party. I was there. There was no confidential information that was discussed. It was a sort of a get-together with some of Britain's leading entrepreneurs, who, by the way, we should thank for creating growth in our economy and being on this drive to create growth for every ordinary working family in this country, about our plans for growing the economy.
How was the Chancellor's mood as he drank champagne?
Well, I'm not even sure that the Chancellor was drinking champagne. I think he was drinking a soft drink. He was absolutely clear that he has set out a path for this country to create growth, and the reason we want to create growth is to ensure that every family who is really worried about things like their mortgage rate would have been terrified if the government hadn't have taken action on energy bills. People seem to forget that just a few weeks ago we were talking about 4 million businesses going bust. We were talking about tens of millions of people losing their job. We were talking about the average household having an energy bill of £6,000.
And now we're talking about 40% of mortgages being taken off the market, and we're talking about the Bank of England having to step in with a £65 billion bailout in order to stop a run on pension funds.
Through the action the government has taken, we have cut on average £1,000 from people's energy bills. We have stopped those millions of budgets going bust. Look, on the mortgage market, I understand there is concern.
What would you say to people who are really concerned about the mortgage market?
What I would say to them is the government is working both with the Bank of England, and you saw that both the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have been working with the OBR and the Bank of England to ensure that we have stability in the mortgage market. I know and believe that will come. I understand it's a distressing time for people. I understand people are worried about their mortgage, but the government is working to ensure that we have stability in that market for every household in this country.
Now, the Sunday Times article also says the Chancellor gave insights, as they put it, into future government spending cuts at the event. Can you rule that out, that he made those comments?
Well, I certainly didn't hear him make those comments.
Have you asked him whether he did?
Well, I was there, so I listened to what he said, and what he talked about was his plan for growth. And what he had said.
But you can't categorically rule out that he didn't have those conversations with anyone at the event, can you?
Well, I can't categorically rule it out because I didn't hear every conversation he had. But in terms of what you asked me, is the Chancellor made a statement or a speech talking about future plans. I can categorically rule out that in that speech, which is what I heard, we were all having our own conversations, of course.
But we don't know about the other conversations.
You don't know about conversations that people have privately.
No, but I would ask him before coming on a programme like this.
So, no, I can categorically rule out that in terms of the address he made to the group of people who were there as part of this normal Treasurer's event, he did not give any insight into future plans, and I'm sure in terms of his private conversations, he didn't give any insight. OK,
well, let's look at the future plans now. Are you going to cut spending to bring public finances under control?
Well, I think every household understands that actually the reason this government is going for growth is because when you're struggling with your household budget, as many households are, you need to grow your personal household budget, in many cases people's pay packets, that's why we're going for growth, but you also need to manage your expenditure. And I don't think it's unreasonable for the government to say that the public sector should look at its expenses in the same way that every single household is doing in this country.
So that means
what we've heard from the government is there's going to be a drive to trim fat in terms of government expenditure.
Trim fat. You use that word, trim fat. What do you mean by trim fat?
Well, I think everyone would accept that, you know, there are efficiencies that can be found in terms of public...
Where is the fat?
Well, I'll give you one example. You know, the government has set out ways in which it's going to seek to recover the bounce-back loans, many of which were taken incorrectly. We heard about the whole-scale fraud in bounce-back loans. That's a way we can recover money.
How much money is that, though? Come on. I mean, we're currently spending more on debt interest payments than the entire education budget. You're going to have to find a lot of fat.
Well, isn't that the reason the government... That's the reason the government wants to grow the economy. Because we have a choice.
That's why I'm asking you directly. Yeah, where is the fat?
Well, let me answer the question then. We have a choice in front of us, don't we? We can keep doing more of the same, which is low growth, high taxes, stagflation as it's called, or we can do what the government has done, which is try and create high growth with a lower tax economy. And the reason to do that, like every household budget I've mentioned earlier, the reason to do that is if you have increasing bills, you have two choices. You can either cut the bills, cut your usage, or you can increase the amount of money you have coming into the household. That is exactly what this government is trying to do. We are trying to increase the amount of money coming in, i.e. grow the economy. We're not doing that as some academic exercise. We're doing it because it's right for every household in this country. While at the same time, it would be completely irresponsible of any government not to say, in the way that households are finding savings in their budget, it would be completely irresponsible to say the public sector or government departments should in some way be immune from the decisions that other households are having to take.
Well, in the same way that people who are earning the, over £150,000 a year will be immune as they're getting a tax cut?
Well, they are, you're right, they are getting a tax cut, but that's because these are the entrepreneurs who drive our economy. But the more important thing is that every single person in work... Let me finish, please.
I just want to come in.
Every single person in work, when their payslip drops through the letterbox next month, will have had their national insurance cut. Every single person who's got an energy bill, when their energy bill drops through the letterbox this month, will see that the government has capped prices to help with household budgets. And on the question of energy bills, as a percentage of GDP, as a government, we have done more than any other government in Europe to support households. And I think more than anything else, that shows how we're on the side of working households.
I just want to come in on the phrase that you used about entrepreneurs who drive the economy, because I do think that a lot of workers will find that quite offensive, to be completely honest. You're talking about the very wealthy driving the economy. But what about all the other people who also drive the economy? And we know, don't we, from analysis, that it's only the people at the top, the richest people, who are going to benefit overall from the tax changes that were introduced in the budget.
Well, sorry, we don't know that from analysis. I'm sorry, that is complete and utter nonsense.
Because of the changes to the personal allowance.
No, I'm sorry, that is simply incorrect. So let's put it on the record what we are doing. Every single working person in this country is going to see a cut in their national insurance next month, this month now. And we also know that the lower paid in this country, as a percentage of their income, pay more in national insurance than higher earners. So, in fact, if there's a percentage of income, it is giving a bigger tax cut to those lower earners than it is to the top earners. So I'm saying what you're saying is simply incorrect. Your analysis is wrong, and I am proud to be part of a government that is prioritising tax cut for every worker in this country, not just those on the top end.
Are benefits going to increase in line with inflation?
Well, look, I'm not going to come on here and make financial statements. That's a matter for the Chancellor, and we will know in due course what is going to happen with benefits.
They would have got £19 a week more, wouldn't they, if the changes announced by Rishi Sunak to uprate benefits in line with inflation had gone on. How much, given the inflation pressures, given what we've seen with energy bills, as you acknowledged, going up, food inflation in double figures, how much more a week do you think people in benefits should be able to have to really meet that pressure? What, £19 a week, is that too much? £10 a week,
well,
nothing?
I've already said I won't make, it's not for me to make fiscal announcements in relation to benefits. I know and understand, and this government knows and understands the huge pressures that households are facing, and that's why we are pivoting to grow the economy. Because, in fact, it's only by growing the economy that we can ensure that Britain can get a pay rise, we can ensure that people get really decent public services that they rely on, and we can also ensure that we can properly fund both our public services, but all the other things the government has to do. Like, we are, seeing threats from the east. We need to properly fund our armed forces. We need to properly fund the police. We need to properly fund our NHS. That is the reason we're growing the economy. And it's for every working household in this country that we are doing that.
I just want to have a look, if I may, at a chart. This is analysis from the Resolution Foundation. Now, this is showing the impact of the tax changes in the budget, and also, if I know you haven't confirmed
I can't actually see it.
Yeah, if you haven't confirmed, though you haven't confirmed it, the expected changes that we could see to universal credit if their benefits do not rise in line with inflation, and you can see there. It is the very richest households, those on the right of the screen, who are going to be benefiting because of your policy changes. All those people on the bottom, impacted by the benefits, those on lower incomes, negatively impacted. Is that fair?
Right, I'm really sorry, I can't actually see the table. What I'd go back and say is that what we are doing for every household in this country is ensuring that they get a cut in their tax bill next month when that pay slip drops through the letterbox or arrives via our email. We've taken action on energy bills, which people were, we were going to lose tens of millions of jobs in this country because of the cost of energy for business. We've taken action that isn't now going to happen. We were going to see inflation peak at 19%, predicted to peak at 19%. Because we've taken action on energy bills, that now won't happen. Inflation isn't some academic figure that bankers and economists and politicians and journalists like talking about. It has a huge impact on every household in this country. That is why we're taking action. That is why we want to grow the economy, because we want every single household to benefit from economic growth. The
reports in the papers today that Liz Truss advised King Charles not to attend the next COP climate change summit. He, of course, is someone who has been quite supportive, shall we say, of the green agenda. Can you commit to the net zero carbon emissions target by 2050?
The government remains committed to the net zero target by 2050.
So that's not going to change.
So it's a yes.
OK, thank you. I appreciate the clear answer in that. And now I just want to look a bit overall at the direction you're taking, because in the Telegraph you've got an article today. You say we're overturning the tired economic orthodoxy that's prevailed for decades and are forging a new direction for the country. How big a change is this?
Well, look, it's further to say how big a change is. I've been really clear what we're doing. We're seeking to create growth in the economy. I've been really clear about why we're doing it. We are doing it to ensure that there is a rising spring tide of prosperity that flows through every household in this country. That's what we're doing. That's why we're doing it. And it's because this government's values are on the side of hard-working families across the UK.
From your quote there, a new direction for the country, overturning the orthodoxy that's prevailed for decades, so Conservative administrations as well as Labour ones. What's your mandate to change what multiple governments have done?
Well, certainly the Prime Minister. We have a mandate on a 2019 manifesto. And don't forget that 2019 manifesto set out two things. It set out that we wouldn't increase taxes. And in fact, we've complied with that by reversing the national insurance rise. It set out that we would drive to create economic growth. And that's exactly what the Prime Minister's doing. We have an absolute mandate from that manifesto, and we will continue to deliver.
Do you really believe you've got an absolute mandate from that manifesto? There was nothing about scrapping the 45p rate of tax. Boris Johnson promised the government wouldn't go back to austerity. He won a landslide promising big spending, more nurses, more funding for schools, more police in seats like yours,
and you're absolutely right. That is why we're trying to create growth.
But you're also talking about public spending cuts. You're talking about trimming the fat. That is very different language from Boris Johnson in that 2019.
I think the British public would expect this government. There's no such thing as government money; it's taxpayers' money.
But do you not acknowledge the key shift in this government and what has gone on before? You have said that you're about to rip up the orthodoxy of decades of previous governments. How can you say that you had a mandate from the last election? You don't.
Well, I think the British public, just to answer your question, would rightly expect this government, when we are spending their money, it's not government money, it's their money, would rightly expect this government to make the difficult choices to ensure that they're... No, sorry, I'm answering the question that I was halfway through when you interrupted me. With this government to ensure that we do not waste their money and we deliver efficient public services. Look, on the orthodoxy, I don't think that it's a new orthodoxy for the Conservative Party to say that it wants to deliver growth. And what we have seen over the last couple of decades is a high-tax, low-growth economy. And the truth is that if we are going to change that, not for the government, not for bankers, as you sought to say earlier, saying this is the government's motivation. It's for working households. It's for working households in this country. That's what we're doing. It's the right motivation. And in truth, it's how households work. People know that when their bills arrive, they can either cut their consumption or they can get higher salary or higher wages, go out there and get that new job.
Sure, it's
That's the approach the government is taking.
You
we
can
are
decide
saying,
to
look,
cut taxes for
let's
the wealthiest or upright benefits
create growth
for the poor.
so households can afford their bills, as well as the brilliant work we're doing on energy bills.
You were talking about what people expect to see from government, what the public would like. And let's have a quick look, shall we, at YouGov poll from Thursday. Now, I accept there have been different polls, but this one from Thursday, YouGov poll showing Labour has a 33-point lead. Now, and I know polls fluctuate, and I know we're outside of an election, but this is quite jaw-dropping. You know, we haven't seen a Labour lead like this since the 1990s, and it's not just this poll. Opinion, 19-point lead. The Prime Minister's net approval falling from -9 to -37 in a week. That's worse than Boris Johnson.
Well, let me tell you also last Thursday, there were 2 by-elections in my constituency of Rosendale and Darwin, both of which we won with an increased vote for the Conservative Party. The difference between that poll and those by-elections last week is it's a forced decision where people have to make a choice. And I know and believe that when we get to that general election, when we have delivered that growing economy, when we have ensured that the benefit is felt by every household in this country, that it'll be a very different result than shown in that snap poll, a few days after the government has done a mini fiscal event.
OK, well, it's certainly interesting to see your opinion and how different Conservatives are feeling at the minute. It has been, I'll be honest, quite difficult to find people to talk to this conference, perhaps because a lot of them are staying away or they don't necessarily feel that they want to talk to the media right now. There are also reports that some Conservative MPs are even prepared to vote against the budget or the financial measures in the budget. If they did that, would that be treated as a vote of confidence? Would they lose the whip?
Yes.
They would lose the whip?
Correct.
And so do you think as well...
although that is a decision for the Chief Whip, but as far as I'm concerned, yes.
Then they would lose the whip for doing that. Reports also saying that there are people who are even thinking about trying to find a way of instating a new leader, bypassing the members, having an ability to have a say and having MPs to decide. What do you think the reaction to that would be?
Well, look, I mean, what I would say to colleagues is we have a new Prime Minister. She has a mandate both from colleagues and our membership. She absolutely has a plan for this country that will create economic growth, the benefit of which will be felt by every household in this country. We need to get on and implement that plan. We need to unify behind that plan and go out there into our communities in Lancashire, across this country, and advocate our core values of why we are doing this. And I'm sure that if we do that, it will lead ultimately to long-term electoral success. It's
been really interesting talking to you today. I genuinely wasn't really sure, how your sort of manner would be, your demeanour would be today. You're someone who's always, advocated for levelling up, right? Mm-hmm. You've sought out people who may not naturally be Conservative voters. You kind of care about the communities outside of London. How comfortable are you personally with where the Conservative Party is right now and the way forward?
I'm absolutely comfortable with it, and I'll tell you why. Because this idea that I read in the media that people in communities across our United Kingdom, not just in the north but in the southwest, all over the country, voted for Conservatives because in some way they wanted a Labour government, they wanted a sort of Labour-light government or whatever it may be. In my experience, I'm not a pollster, but in my experience of knocking on 14,000 doors over the summer is just completely wrong. What families want is a government that is absolutely determined to create growth for them, to increase their salary, to deliver world-class public services, to be on their side. And that's what they are getting with this government. And on the point of levelling up, in the new tax-free investment zones that the government's announced around the country, we are going to see that agenda turbocharged. And we're going to see new businesses opening, creating those highly paid, secured jobs. That's why I got into politics. I'm proud to be part of a government that is going to deliver for the community and communities that I have the privilege of calling home. I've lived and worked in the North my entire life. I know this government is going to deliver for the North, and I'm proud to be part of that story.
It's a big gamble on growth, though, isn't it? It's all or nothing on growth. How are you so sure that you guys are right? The voting public, as we've seen in the polls, are wrong. Other Conservative MPs are wrong. Many of the people in the markets are wrong. How confident are you?
Well, look, markets both react to government statements, and in my experience, having tracked this over a very long period, often overreact. So let's see where the markets are in 6 months' time.
So do you think they may be overreacted?
No, I say they can overreact. I don't know if they did in this case. I'm not an economist. But let's see where the markets are in 6 months' time. I think that's a far better measure of the success of the mini-budget fiscal event. But secondly, look, in terms of creating that growth, let me tell you a little story. My sister-in-law went to hospital with her father, who lives in a care home and has dementia. He fell over and they had a suspected broken hip. He was in that A&E department with dementia, confused, not knowing where he was, for 10 hours waiting to see a doctor. That is completely unacceptable. And the reason this government wants to create growth is to ensure that we have the money coming into the country, like it comes into every household when you create growth, to give more money to the NHS, to deliver world-class public services. That's what people want to see. That is what this government is going to do, and that's why I'm proud to be part of it.